Hey everybody, it's Fox with FoxeoGames, and this is a Fox First Scent of Nioh, the second public testing demo / alpha that they've released for this game. Now, Nioh is basically best described as a sort of feudal Japan samurai version of Dark Souls. It's obviously inspired by it, although it's technically, I guess, been in development for a long time. It's one of those games that apparently has been in development so long it's radically changed from what it started out as. It's very clearly taking elements from the Souls series. In fact, when players die, you can summon that player from where they died to actually fight them as a sort of red phantom. There is co-op as well, and the co-op takes a couple different forms. But you can actually summon players, not from summon signs as far as I can tell, but from these little prayer shrines that you visit. There are lots of little things that make it similar to Souls, but ultimately, when we talk about Souls-like games that remind us of the Souls series, we're talking about the combat primarily. The setting isn't so critical. The characters aren't so important. The story isn't so important, in my opinion. What really makes a game similar to Souls for me is in the combat, and this game definitely shares a lot with that. Now, there are some differences. There are effectively 3 stances for each of the various kinds of weapons that you have. Now, there are weapons like spears, hammers, katanas, and so forth. There's also bow and arrow. Now, for the spears, katanas, hammers, and all that good stuff, you have a high stance, a medium stance, and a low stance, which are effectively, strong, balanced, and quick or fast. And the strong attacks are slower, do more damage, obviously. The balanced attacks are somewhere in the middle of strong, and the weaker, slower, or faster attacks. And then the low stance is, of course, your quick but fairly weak attacks. I found myself using all 3 different stances depending on what weapon I used. When I played the first of their alpha, open public beta demos, whatever they want to call it, I basically used a bunch of different weapons. I used a spear. You can see here I have a spear on my back right there. I have it equipped. I used a hammer. I used various katanas. I used various different sets of armor. And I found that all 3 stances did have some value. Now, granted, there were issues with, for example, if you put the hammer in the low stance to make it a faster swinging weapon, it sort of, to me at least, partially negated the whole purpose of the hammer, which was to be a slow, really hard-hitting weapon. But it still made a big difference what weapon you chose. It wasn't like you could pick the hammer, put it in the low stance, and then attack as fast as, for example, the katana. There are lots of different weapons in the game, lots of different pieces of armor, lots of secrets to find. There are items to find like you see right here, and when I do find the items, it's almost like that, flashy, glowing soul on the corpse, just like it is in Dark Souls. So many similarities to the game, and yet there are some differences. One of the big differences is their key system, where you can build your, basically stamina, where you can build it back up depending on how you conduct yourself in combat. I never quite got used to it. I don't even know how it fully works. I do apologize for that. But just like the last time they had this open alpha out, it came at a really bad time for me. I think that week I'd worked over 80 some hours. And then I think the following week I did like 97 hours at work or something like that. So I just wasn't really able to play much. I was barely able to play just long enough to capture some footage. I think I spent a grand total of maybe an hour and a half with it, which isn't really enough time to get a good idea, especially since I died so many times. But what I can say is that it's shaping up to be an interesting game. I have a lot of problems with it because it does suffer from some what I consider to be control issues, where if an enemy gets the drop on you, it's way too easy for them to just stun lock you from full health to dead in a matter of 2-3 seconds. And no matter how a game is structured, no matter how much they try to balance the game for that, anytime you get stun locked from full to dead, especially if it happens really quickly, it just feels cheap. And it just feels completely cheap, and it sort of aggravates you as a player. I know it does for me. I think it does for most people. You don't like the feeling that you're losing control, or you don't have control of your character. For the most part, control was okay, but like I said, in combat, sometimes the character just seemed really sluggish. And another thing I really don't like that this game does is that when you run out of all of your ki or stamina, whatever it's called, you enter into this sort of tired state where you kind of have to catch your breath and can't do anything. Other games have done that, like Dragon's Dogma does that. I really don't like that. I prefer the Souls system where when you run out of stamina, you can move at a normal rate, you just can't run or attack until the stamina builds back up a little bit. I prefer that system because it keeps things flowing better, and I just never like seeing my character sort of like bend over and breathe for a bit. It just feels like I'm being pulled out of the game. First impressions, this really is a first impressions, are not the best. I would say that I felt more frustrated by it than anything else, and I'm not sure how much I'm going to like it when it finally comes out, but they've done a lot to change it since the first time the public alpha came out, so I look forward to seeing what they change in the future until it releases. Definitely going to pick it up and give it another shot. I'm Fox with FoxeoGames, and I'll see you next time.